In the days before the internet, television, and even telephones, how did kings find out what their rivals were up to? The answer might surprise you, because there was a vast secret network of spies that thrived in the Middle Ages. From the 13th to the 15th century, an intricate system of paid informants, double agents and undercover operatives gathered intelligence for monarchs across Europe, and although it's long gone, this hidden world can be uncovered through the secret messages they left behind. Kings spent heavily to keep tabs on their neighbors, whether to prevent attacks or to ensure that their own secrets stayed safe. It wasn't just paranoia either. If you've ever been to a medieval castle, you'll know that the rooms are tiny, so if your neighbor was planning something, the walls were likely to pick up the sound anyway. But the rumors that spread through these grapevines could also easily get distorted. That's why royal informants were often the only source of reliable information. And yet this whole system operated with almost no records at all. So how do we know about it? The answer is that despite being a part of a hidden world, these spies sometimes left traces of their activities behind in the form of coded letters. Though the alphabet used was a cipher developed in the 1800s by a British cryptographer, it can be cracked, offering us a rare glimpse into the murky past of espionage. These ciphers have allowed historians to identify the locations where the spies met their informers, dropped off their packages, and ultimately found the documents that helped kings maintain power. But who exactly were these spies? What did they get up to, and what kinds of secrets were worth knowing? Join us as we travel across medieval Europe to uncover the truth about the spy game. The first thing you need to know about medieval spies is that most were unemployed directly by the king. Instead, the monarch would hire a secretary, whose job it was to gather information from informants across the kingdom. Sometimes the informants were just bored aristocrats with too much time on their hands. Other times they were former servants who knew secret passages and hiding places around the palace. For example, one informant working in the French royal court during the 1360s was a man called Jean de Mo. He was paid 20 shillings a month to alert his royal employer to any plots against him, and when he learned that 2 courtiers were planning to poison the king, he passed the information on and both men were executed. Even enemy countries had spies in the other's court. In 1475, the English King Edward IV sent an agent named Thomas Bydrop to live in the household of the young Scottish King James III. His mission was to keep an eye on the Scots and make sure that the 2 countries remained on good terms. But Bydrop became so integrated into the royal court that he soon began passing information back to England about his fellow. At one point he wrote to his English superiors that Queen Elizabeth, James's mother, was behaving inappropriately with one of her son's counselors. This gossip made its way back to Elizabeth, who then had Biddle thrown into the River Forth, though thankfully he survived. The danger of having spies in the royal court is clear, so monarchs also needed undercover agents who could go anywhere. A famous example of this kind of spy is an Italian con artist called Monardo Gal, who infiltrated the court of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. In the late 1320s, disguised as a Bohemian lord, he stole imperious secrets while pretending to be the emperor's friend. When he was eventually exposed, Galate escaped, leaving behind a trove of compromising documents that revealed the extent of Charles V's infidelity. But even these undercover operatives relied on informants to give them crucial information. One of the main reasons kings hired spies was to keep track of other rulers' movements. After all, a large army can travel quickly, which meant that a king who didn't know his neighbor's plans was sitting in a very precarious position. This was especially true in France, which was regularly invaded by the English throughout the Middle Ages. And so, in 1345, King John the Good of France appointed an agent known only as André to monitor the English king's activity. André's methods were simple but effective. He traveled to northern France and listened outside the walls of Edward III's camp, picking up information about the English war plans and passing them back to the French king. He was paid 100 livres for every letter he delivered and earned the nickname Spy King for his efforts. Keeping tabs on armies required a wide network of informants. Imagine you're a spy master in the English town of Dover, which sits at the mouth of the English Channel. You might send a wide-eyed young apprentice into the forest to count the number of birds. Because birds fly south for the winter, the size of their flocks indicates how far away spring is. Since you know that armies will arrive as soon as the ground thaws, you'll use this knowledge to estimate when you should get ready for an invasion. Spies also kept an eye on port towns, roads and bridges, reporting anything unusual, such as a high number of merchants or an unusually large number of wagons. Anyone who wanted to move an army would have to pass through one of these points, making them vital sources of intelligence. They were also excellent sources of gossip. Since innkeepers and water carriers tend to know everyone in town, they were often willing to share rumors about suspicious newcomers, and sometimes the biggest threat was simply someone who looked different. During the 100 Years' War, Queen Isabella of France ordered her soldiers to arrest anyone wearing a red coat, assuming they must be English. In reality, they were German. There were even spies on the battlefield. After King Henry V of England defeated the French at the Battle of Agincourt in 1450, he had his archers fire over the top of the dead, so that they would unrun out of arrows. This tactic surprised the French, who hadn't anticipated such trickery. But Henry's archers were actually learning from experience, and they weren't the only ones. Espionage wasn't just about keeping track of your enemies, it was also about protecting yourself. Kings kept spies all over their own realm to learn about rebellions and take action before they grew out of control. And as technology improved, these spies got better at staying hidden. One major development came with the invention of writing paper, which was waterproof and lightweight. No longer did messengers have to rely on parchment, which was expensive and bulky. But the introduction of paper led to another problem, as it was easy to destroy with a little water. To solve this, scribes began adding numbers to the margins of pages to indicate which line each word began on. This allowed them to write in invisible ink, since anyone who wanted to read the page would have to follow the numbers and read the words for Spies also made use of invisible ink though. Their preferred method was to dip their quill in vinegar and then write on special bark paper made from the inner bark of a lime tree. Once the message was dry, it was invisible, but it could be revealed with a splash of water. Of course, some secrets were too valuable to trust to these risky methods, and the spies carrying important documents needed protection. For this purpose, they created false identities, often using the name of a saint followed by the name of a local noble. Then they put these papers inside hollowed-out books, staves, or even shoes, which were then carried by couriers disguised as merchants, beggars, monks, or students. Most of these couriers were expendable, and if they were caught, they were given a swift execution. Only the spies who delivered the message successfully were remembered. Though the tradecraft was evolving, the fundamentals never changed. A spy was only as good as their sources, and to get valuable information, you had to build a network of informants to reward their services. Spies carried small objects with them called pop, which were essentially business cards with the spy's code name and instructions for the recipient. These objects were exchanged in public places like crossroads or fountains, and they ensured that the informant knew whom to contact without revealing anything to outsiders. To crack these codes, historians start with the document itself. The type of writing reveals a lot about its purpose. For instance, an account of a battle won't look like a love letter. Historians can also study the language to understand who wrote it and for whom. Finally, once they have a translation, they search for keywords, names, and dates, which help narrow down the possible subjects and lead to more discoveries. It might seem surprising that the medieval world was full of secret agents, but it's easy to see why they were necessary. Just imagine living in a world where news traveled slowly and wars were fought on your doorstep. The ability to protect your realm and your people depended on knowing what was happening around you. So it's not surprising that spying was taken so seriously. After all, the safety of an entire kingdom might depend on a single piece of intelligence. Now watch the gruesome history of torture, or check out how ancient Rome fell apart.